All right. Maybe I'll take the time to introduce our next speaker.
Is there anybody online? Can they see the presenter view, or do they see this view? Thanks.
Okay. So our next speaker is François de Kermenguy. I hope I didn't butcher it too much. And he will present about radiation-induced lymphopenia from mathematical modeling towards mechanistic learning. And you're a postdoc from Harvard Medical School.
Yes. So thank you for the opportunity to talk here. So yes, I will talk about radiation-induced lymphopenia. Basically, I will tell you the story of my PhD in Paris, in Gustave Roussy, even if now I moved to Boston several months ago. So the clinical context of this project is radiation-induced lymphopenia, which is basically when you treat patients with radiotherapy, you kill lymphocytes, okay? You have the lymphocyte level pre-treatment, you have a sharp fall-off during radiotherapy, and it's hard to recover after that. This lymphopenia appears quite often. 50% of patients on average will experience a severe lymphopenia, and it's a negative prognostic factor in terms of overall survival or PFS. We showed that in this paper in 2023. For about all the tumor location, it's a bad prognostic factor. So I'm a physicist, medical physicist, so just want to compute dose. We can ask, how can we estimate dose to T cells and to circulating T cells? So to answer this question, we published last year the lymphodose model, which is a model to estimate dose to circulating lymphocytes. So very briefly, it's composed of two interconnected compartment models describing both the slow circulation of T cells between immune organs and the more rapid circulation of the cells in the circulating blood. Okay, and we put a kinetic Monte Carlo algorithm to simulate like that the many trajectories of T cells in the compartment model. We then simulate the irradiation, the treatment. Here it's brain treatment, so we irradiated the brain compartment and the lymph node compartment, because in the neck you have a lot of lymph nodes with many T cells. Yes, and we simulate about like 30 fractions. The main results of this paper were that you have the dose distribution to circulating T cells, is that even for very radiosensitive T cells, it's quite low. We have less than 300 milligrams on average, which is not enough to explain the high prevalence of circulating radiation-induced lymphopenia in brain cancer patients. So we published this paper last year, and very recently, the team from Harvard Paganity in MGH published a very nice paper and reached exactly the same conclusion, that the doses are too low to explain just the lymphopenia, and there is something else. So to investigate this question, we asked, well, can the lymphocyte dose predict the lymphopenia? So to do so, we created a patient cohort, about 200 patients with gliomas, with on average 7 blood samples between the beginning of the treatment and 1 year post-treatment. We applied our framework to compute dose to T cells, and we performed a statistical analysis, very straightforward analysis, univariate and then multivariate. And long story short, we found that the dose to T cells was only weakly correlated to the incidence of lymphopenia, so with an HP value of 0.06. So, yeah, but it's interesting because it corroborates our hypothesis that there is something else. And what is this something else? So we can go back to the literature. So yes, T cells, super radiosensitive cells, so you irradiate to kill the T cells. But there is also chemotherapy. TMZ, we know that it kills lymphocytes. You have some disease tumor-related effects on the T cell subsets. And very interesting, you have also indirect effect of irradiation. You have this paper, the science paper on the left for you, showing that you irradiate, it induces MDSC, and this MDSC kill T cells. So it's an indirect effect of irradiation. So it starts to be much more complicated. I don't know how to manage with all this mechanism. As usual with immune system, it's always super complicated and it's really hard to modelize. So the question we ask is, how can we build clinically effective tools with all this data? So the question we try to answer in this paper we published, it came out last summer, and I'm really happy to be able to present it because I answered the reviewers while moving to Boston, and I didn't even have a desk in my apartment, so quite cool to be able to present that today. So the basic idea, it's a mechanistic learning session. It's to say, okay, your mechanistic model in blue in the clinic, it can be quite simple, but often oversimplistic, or much more complicated, but often you just can't use it in the clinic. In red, you have your clinical data and machine learning model that you just put the clinical data, not just, but, and you can predict basically with a black box the lymphopenia or something. And the idea is to combine both, okay, with mechanistic learning, to combine patient-specific data with population-level trend. And the idea is to really be able to better screen patient and to adapt the treatment accordingly, or to better predict the lymphopenia mechanism. So I will present you two examples about how to effectively combine this mechanistic model and a machine learning model. So the first one is, for example, to determine patient-specific model parameters. So you have your mechanistic model. So you have your mechanistic model with, for example, two parameters. It can be, for instance, the lymphocyte radiosensitivity, alpha, and the lymphocytes repopulation rate, K. For instance, you don't know that for a given patient. And your ML model. The idea is to create, for instance, a virtual lymphocyte dynamic data set. You use your mechanistic model to create the T-cell dynamic during treatment, and you train your machine learning to predict your patient-specific parameters. And then in a second step in the clinic, you take the early fraction lymphocyte depletion, and you use your machine learning model to predict patient-specific parameters, and then you use your mathematical model to predict the whole treatment T-cell depletion, and you can adapt the treatment accordingly with that. The other example, and the previous speaker really nicely introduced it, it's to basically universal differential equation. For instance, you can have this very simple model with a repopulation compartment and a circulating compartment. And on the top, the repopulation term, it can be really hard, like immune homeostasis. It's something really complicated. And sometimes people just use an exponential model to modelize it, but it's really oversimplistic. And we'll say we don't really know how to modelize that. So you can just replace your repopulation term by a small fully connected neural network and fit, I will say, this differential equation system on your data. So maybe to think about that, you have to be very careful about the loss function, and to use, for example, physiology-informed loss function. You have this really nice paper. The first one is for glucosis level, but the methodology is really good. And then if you want a concrete example on how to train this type of model, you can use Julia. I use Julia for years now. It's, in my opinion, the best language for scientific computing. And you have here a very hands-on example on how to train this type of model. As a conclusion, maybe we can, a bigger picture. I love radiation-induced lymphopenia, okay, but it's not everything, okay? And radiation has a whole spectrum of immune effect, both immunosuppression and immunostimulation, okay? And I think that the current treatment planning system is really use irradiation as a cytotoxic agent, and is really based on the surviving fraction, the linear, the quadratic model, to put those constraints on organs and to put the dose to the tumor. I think it's time to think about it, like the future treatment planning, to think about irradiation really as an immunomodulation agent, and it's really, we really have to rethink everything about radiation with this paradigm. So if you're interested about this topic, about radiotherapy and immunotherapy, you can join us next September in New York for the 10th edition of the Immunorad conference. It's more about biology, but it's super interesting, and we have much better music. Sorry, guys.
Thanks a lot. Are there questions from the audience? Okay.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I really enjoyed it. I had a quick question about your experience in training these universal differential equations. One of the major reasons that I find them a little intimidating is because if you increase the size of the system even a little bit, you might end up getting into situations where it becomes extremely stiff and the training becomes too difficult. Do you have any ideas, suggestions in that regard?
So just first, this paper, it was just a review and we proposed some ideas to use mechanistic learning for radiation-induced lymphopenia. But for instance, yes, it's the paper about the glucosis level where they use this UDE for modelize the glucosis level. It's really interesting. You can see that if you don't put regularization on your loss function, it failed to really fit the data after the end of the data point. So with a physiologically based regularization, basically it can be some simple stuff, just the glucosis level can be negative typically, or some stuff like that. You really improve the results. So it's really important. If you're interested about that, you can also check the second paper. It's a preprint, but it's really cool, and they really deal with this problem of regularization of the loss function.
Thank you, François. I'm just curious about your statement about Julia. Why you think it's the best language for scientific computing?
Maybe we can do another talk, an entire session about why it's way better than Python. Drop the mic. No, it just from technical point of view, you have an integrated package manager, for instance. You don't struggle with package version, or maybe I'm just bad in Python, but you don't have this awful indentation stuff. Like you have a for loop, you put end at the end, and it just works. And and it's really cool because you can really write code like as a Python code, and when you need performance, it's there. And now in my postdoc, I'm doing imaging stuff in Julia again, and it's really cool because you can really learn how to write performance code, like efficient with memory efficient and a lot of stuff. We can talk about that later. But it's
so Julia is better on an ironing board, and Python is better on a desk, I guess. So it's very interesting about your conclusion that irradiating trafficking lymphocyte is not the reason for lymphopenia. I think that's an incredibly important finding. Do you think the lymphopenia predominantly comes from irradiation of tumor-draining lymph nodes within the radiation field then?
It's interesting. Again, it's a really straightforward assumption. You can think you irradiate lymph nodes and it kills lymphocytes. You have a lot of preclinical data showing that it's not as simple.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, this Nature Communication paper, super cool, from last year, they show that if you irradiate the tumor plus the tumor-draining lymph nodes in mice, you totally modify the recirculation pattern of T cells. It's driven by CXCL9 pathway. And basically, you kind of trap lymphocytes in the lymph node, and you create a kind of lymphopenia in blood, but they are still there.
Right.
So you don't kill them, really. So it's really open question, and I used to say that with immunology, more I learn, less I understand what happened. So
Fair point.
I think it's my main conclusion.
All right, thank you. Right.